I'll welcome and hand over to Stuart. Yeah. So good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know, I'm Karen Meakin. I'm the CEO here at ScotlandIS, and we are the trade body and cluster management organisation for Scotland's digital and tech sector. Last September, we launched a series of ScotlandIS Tech Tidbits. Make sure you have your own teeth in to say that, which take place on the first Tuesday of every month around 11:30. These sessions last about 30 minutes and are designed to educate you on areas that may be where you want some more information on. This session, as I'd said earlier, is being recorded and it will be on our YouTube page. So please, if you can keep your cameras and your mics off for now. Any questions you have, please can you put them in the chat and we will come back to them at the end. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Stuart Beattie, who is Senior Principal Consultant at Kick ICT, who are members of ours. Stuart's presentation concentrates on a day in the life of a cyber attack, which I am sure, certainly in our sector, is something that we are seeing more of, and we need to ensure that our members and businesses in Scotland are as resilient as they can be. So he'll be explaining how it can unfold, pointing out key areas where it could have been stopped, and highlighting some key lessons that can help protect your business from an attack. So without further ado, over to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, so let me just start off. We've got a PowerPoint presentation which I'm just going to bring up just to go through with you. So it's not going to be death by PowerPoint, I promise. What we've got here today, I'm just going to try and take you through some of the reasons or some of the reasoning behind why people get cyber attacks. And then we're going to have a look at what actually happens during a cyber attack or what makes a cyber attack up. Because quite often people know about this, but they don't really know exactly how it happens and how easy it is to happen. So I should say we're obviously in a kind of fairly technical audience here tonight or this afternoon. So some of the things, if you're kind of really into cyber and you know your cyber stuff inside out, this may be slightly boring for you, or you might not learn anything new here. But anybody who's maybe in kind of management or more in marketing or kind of other areas, organisations, might hopefully learn a few things. And what this presentation is it's one that we give to our customers just to give them an insider flavour of what's involved. Now, I've taken out all the Kick kind of branding and the kind of Kick areas where we then go off and do their sales presentation, but you might find it's useful if you wanted to do this for your own customers, just to bring them up to date with what actually happens and to give them some ideas around exactly how that you can help them to survive and hopefully actually stop any cyber attacks from happening in the first place. So the worrying thing is at the moment that we kind of maybe hope that sometimes, you know, all the technology advances will go on and we'll manage to get rid of all the cyber challenges and attacks that are happening. But unfortunately, things aren't getting any better. With increase in all the artificial intelligence that's coming online and all the additional stuff that's fed from that, it means that the challenges in trying to protect yourself from all this has actually become much more difficult to do. And when you combine that with the fact that people have limited budgets, so they're trying to look and see where they can spend their money most effectively to try and protect themselves from cyber. And again, not just money, it's also time from their IT departments and other people in the organisation to try and make sure they get the best bang for their buck to protect themselves. But at the same time, though, all of that's happening, we're seeing more and more attacks are becoming much more common. And with all those attacks that happen, there's the unknown challenges around them. There's the financial problems that you have. So, for example, when somebody attacks you, you might lose some financial information, which means you have to pay some fines. But it's a reputation for your company as well. It's the big thing. So as soon as you are known as the company who got hacked, people will start to talk about it. And you'll probably know yourself. There'll be in the news, you'll see some organisations. The one that springs to mind, if you remember, MGM Hotels in the States who got hacked a couple of years ago, and everybody always still thinks MGM, oh, they're the ones that lost my credit card details. So it's important for companies to be able to protect themselves against that. But it's not all bad news. There's ways that we can help people to protect themselves against all this. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about why cyber attacks happen. And then towards the end, we're going to break it down and actually show you kind of roughly what happens on the average cyber attack that we see with our customers and the people that we have to step in and help. So it doesn't go into the detail of everything that could happen, but it's a fairly generic flavour of the things that actually do happen on a regular time or regular basis for us. And we generally see, talk to customers or other people who come to us for help, maybe 2-3 times a week for this. So first of all, let's talk about why the cyber attacks actually happen. So, I mean, you maybe think back in the olden days when cyber and people started to roll out antivirus software, it was quite often it was just people who did it for fun. They learned how to program, they wanted to see what they could do, and they got a bit of a kick out of the fact that they would write some antivirus or they'd write some virus, it would spread throughout the world, and then they'd see themselves or talked about on the news or anything else happening. But that's kind of changed now. Cyber attacks now are less likely to be the guy in his bedroom, is more likely to be a big business now. And the reason for that is that people can make money out of this. It's all about how you can make enough money, and obviously money keeps the world going round. And how do they do that? So the information they get, they can sell it online. So if they get a hold of your personal information, maybe even your banking information or your company banking information, or even login details for any of the systems that you use, that's sellable information that then can get passed on and sold for money. And of course, they're in it for the money. But as well as just the kind of collecting that information that they can then sell, there's also a couple of other flavours you should be aware of as well. There's the extortion element of it now, where not just by selling information on, they can actually charge you just to get your data back. So you'll probably all have heard of ransomware attacks where they encrypt all your information and then they charge you money to get that unencrypted again. It's always a bit of a gamble as to whether you actually get your data back. They went a step further now. So whereas before it used to be, any good IT company would say, it's fine, we don't have to pay you any ransom because we've got a really good backup and we've actually restored all our files. Now they turn around and say, well, actually, at the same time as we encrypted it, we also stole that information. So unless you want us to sell all your information in the dark web and all your customer details and all those internal conversations you maybe don't want people to know about, you have to pay us. So we're into the realms of double extortion where you get done twice. And there's also an element of espionage. So there are still government and corporate organisations who will try and steal the information just so they can get an upper hand or get something over on you. And who actually carries these out? As I say again, it's probably more likely to be organisations. And hacking organisations that are out there now are really big business. We're talking about organisations who have their own HR departments and their own, different setups. They have, offices where people go in and work. You even hear stories of people who see job offers online from these organisations. They apply for a job, they go through all the recruitment process with the HR department. They do their work, they do whatever it is they've got to do, and they end their contract, and they don't realise they've been working for anyone who's actually been doing any ransomware or any cyber attacks along the way. Of course, they might have a clue, but it seems like you're just working for a normal IT company. If you want some kind of problems, or if you have really good sleep and you want to make sure that you have some nightmares, have a Google around. One of the things you want to look at, so there's a group called Conti, Lazarus Group's quite a good one, Evil Corp, love the name of that one, and you probably all know Anonymous, the guys with the face masks who always talk about what they're going to hack and how they're going to do things. The other big thing about cyber attacks is that quite often they're not done by an individual person. So if you talk to somebody who's been on the kind of pointy end of the cyber attack, you might hear that they say, well, yeah, we were first compromised about a month ago, and then nothing happened, and then suddenly it all kicked off again. That's because it's quite often it's multiple companies who'll be involved or multiple organisations who will be hacking you'll be involved. So first attack might be that someone tries to get in and get some information. They sell that information on to the next person along the chain. Things will go quiet for a little bit of time before the next person jumps in, and then the next group takes over. And each group sells that information on to the next one. So it's always a chain of just people making money out of your misery. What actually makes it work though? So a lot of this is all really around automation as well, and how they can make things really streamlined. These are honestly organised corporations or organised organisations. So, all the kind of good automation stuff that you might think would be amazing if you had for your company, they've probably got it. And the scale of the whole thing makes it financially viable. So it means that you might think, how can they make money out of selling my email address and a password? Well, They don't make much out of viewers, but if you scale that up to hundreds of millions of emails they've sent out and 100 millions of information, small bits of information they've got, then that's how they manage to get it through. And as I mentioned as well, the whole AI infrastructure now is making it so much easier for them to do all this. So where you've got the benefits of AI, there's always a flip side for that as well. So we've had a look at what actually makes up the cyber attack. So let's talk about a bit more about exactly how things go through. And as I mentioned earlier on, we go through multiple phases for these cyber attacks, so it doesn't all happen in one go. Now, there's a couple of frameworks out there. I'm going to talk about a thing called the MITRE framework, which means that it basically kind of segments all the different stages of an attack. And there's about 12 different stages of the MITRE attack, as I'll just let this frame build. So I'm going to go through and just give you a flavour of exactly what's involved and what stages we go through before we actually take you through a real example of how it actually happens. So first stage is reconnaissance, easy for people to say. So first of all, they try and find out information about you and your company and where you come from and what your job title is and who you work for and other interesting information. They then look to see if they can maybe get some resources. So they figure out, do you have a VPN in place? Do you have Office 365 or Google Mail or anything else that they can then use to target and try and get that through? Then the work actually starts. So there's a whole run up to this before the attack actually happens. But then they try and log in. So they look to say, do you have a username and password for you? Can they get through into the initial setup? Once they're in, then they start to look and they start to run some code. They try and do things against your system to make, the start of the attack. Also, while they're in, they want to make sure they can get back in again. So there's a thing called persistence where they'll look at putting backdoors in place so that if they manage to get your username and password and they get persistence in place, they can sell that on. That's worth more money for them when they sell it. Then they'll look and say, okay, is there any vulnerabilities? Maybe your machine hasn't been patched. Maybe there's a problem where if they do a certain thing, they can get admin privileges to your account. Great, means they've got more access to you and they can do more damage. At the same time, they try and hide their tracks. So there's a lot of clearing of log files, and maybe you've got antivirus, so maybe they'll try and disable that, or maybe you've got some other security systems. They'll try and get around that so that you don't find out what's going on, so they can stay in for longer. They'll try and find out what they can get, so they can continue the attacks. So they'll try and maybe access your directories. If you've got an old-fashioned Active Directory, they'll try and access that to steal the account details. They might be lucky, they might get an administrator account. Maybe there's an administrator logged into your machine. They can steal those credentials from memory. Or it could be something like a token access, where there's security tokens floating around the network and you can steal those off. So this stage, they're on, they've got access to someone's machine in the organization. Now they're going to start having a poke around. They're going to try and find out what else is on your network. What else can they move to? Where can they go using the credentials they've stolen? This is a thing called lateral movement that you've probably heard of. So they try and move from your machine onto a server, onto someone else's machine, so they can try and spread their attack around. Now we're getting into really kind of serious stuff. They found maybe you've got a file server, maybe you've got a SharePoint server, or maybe you've got an email server. They'll try and gather some of that data together, try and consolidate it into a little kind of cache that they can then run off with. And we're getting down to the final stages. They're in, they've got control of your network. So they'll try and put a backdoor in there so that then they can launch attacks from your network back out the way. So maybe some people think you've got a trusted connection, maybe you've got a VPN into a client or into another customer. Maybe you've got some sort of trusted connection back into another organization. That's something they can use because then they're accessing things from your network. So anything that you've got access to, they've got access to as well. And then the final place, that data they've collected, they'll steal that off. So they'll copy that up. And that's where we get into things like the ransomware and the double extortion, where they can then sell that information on. This is where the real money is. At the final stage, where they'll actually look to trash your network, it's the torch and burn. It means that they can hide anything they've done, which makes it more difficult for you to try and go back and piece together what they've stolen and what they're up to. Other times it's just out of badness. They just want to be malicious. So this is your ransomware, where they trash and encrypt all your files, run off laughing while they sell your information on the black market. So that's the horror story. So let's actually look in a bit more detail as to how that actually unravels and where you can jump in, you can stop this if you're lucky enough to catch things happening along. So we spoke about the kind of first stages where reconnaissance is the first step. Now, my screen just went blank there. Hopefully you can all still see me. So let's look at how that actually happens in real life, because this is the biggest area where we see attacks happening. So first thing we've got, think about what happens in your organization when things start to work. Bear with me just when my machine stops crashing. So what happens? Well, think somebody starts a new job in the organization. So think of the information that your organization has put out there into the general population or into the world. So did your HR department maybe post on LinkedIn about the new job role? Did they maybe say this job role's happened and we've got a new person who's come online to the post? Did that person maybe update their LinkedIn profile to say that they now work for your company? Is the company management structure listed somewhere in LinkedIn? Do you mention the fact that you've got a director and certain people that work under it? If it's a small organisation, that could also be on Companies House, that you might be able to find out who the directors of the organisation are. Or also maybe on your company website, you've got an org chart or some way that people can pick up who the organisational structure is. Now, let's move to the managers. So maybe a manager's went off on holiday. Did they put a public post on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on any other social media, maybe an Instagram post to say they're off and enjoying their holiday, or maybe they're off at a conference somewhere and they've put a public out of office message to say, I'm not available, I'm at the conference in wherever it is, please contact so-and-so to get information if I'm out there outside the office. So all that information is available on the internet. And you might think it's quite hard for people to put all that information together, but we're talking now about scripting and IT intelligence and AI, where it's quite simple for you to collect all that information together into a giant database and then have the AI go through and try and join the dots together and give you a target. So what does that mean? Well, from the information we've got there, we can take the fact that a manager's off on holiday. We can look that there's a new person who's just started an organisation. We can tie the things together. Now, it might also be that you maybe in your company website, you've posted about a new company or a new contract you've just signed. So manager can email, say I'm on holiday and fill in the blank. We need to thank all our people in the department for the new contract we signed with company names from the website we've just published. I want to sell them all Amazon vouchers, but I want to make it more personal. Can you buy some Amazon vouchers and send them to my personal mail account? It sounds fanciful, but it happens all the time. Number of times we've seen people who've stopped a new employee who's just sent off Amazon vouchers to somebody in the organisation. Same kind of thing can happen. You might get an email from a manager asking for a bank transfer for the new contract that's come up. And again, they fill in all the information because maybe the out of office said that they're at a conference. So they fill that into the email, makes it seem much more believable. Or it could just be an email from a colleague who's on a holiday saying, I need to fill in this form. Can you click on this link for me and fill it in? All of these work and all of these are used on a daily basis and you see it at a regular time. And it's all down to a bit of simple user training. So if you can do some user training for your users and let them know the simple tricks that you use and the signs to look out for, you can hopefully close a lot of these attacks down before they even get started. Let's move on to the next stage. So let's look at that link that the user clicked on in the email. What actually happens there? So, for example, that might have been a link into an Office 365 page or into some page that pretends to be an Office 365 page. And these links are getting much better. Used to be they'd look really fake, but with AI and a lot of the technology behind it now, they can make them look really as if it's almost like you're on Office 365. And while you're typing in your Office 365 details, that's getting fired through in the back end to another machine, which is then logging into Office 365 on your behalf. So again, when it prompts you for an MFA code, you type the MFA code into the fake website, and it's actually typing that into the system at the back end that those users have got full control over. So it might be, for example, that you type in your MFA code and it says it's the wrong code, you have to type it again. That gives them time to type it in the first time, start the process of registering a second MFA method that they can then use as part of this whole persistence. So that the second time that you type in your code, because you got it wrong the first time, you've then authorized that second step. They're in, they can keep it there, and they're basically got the information they can sell on again. As I say, these have got a lot more effective. AI is really helping with them, and it's all about selling that information on. So kind of things we can do. So user training, great way of doing things. It helps stop the attack from actually happening in the first place. Logging branding used to be quite a good thing, but again, the technology has caught up with them, and the hackers have managed to figure out how they can get around that. But the big thing, multi-factor authentication, which means that you have to have a second form. And again, when I say that you can talk to your customers and talk to your own internal staff about how you can protect yourself against these attacks, make sure that you have MFA turned on, and you'll stop 90% of these attacks before they even get started. And MFA is getting better and better. Some really nice things. The Microsoft Authenticator now, if you use Office 365, is designed to be even more phishing proof. There's a thing called phishing resistant MFA, and even a thing called passwordless MFA, where you don't even have to have a password anymore. And the technology behind these is fairly amazing. So, you might think that you're just typing in a phishing resistant MFA, where you type in the code, or you generate, or you click OK on your phone. There's lots of things happening in the background there. So, for example, there's a Bluetooth connection between you and the device that you're trying to log into. That means that you can't do it from remotely, which means it protects against you being fooled into doing a login from elsewhere in the country. A lot of outdated technology that's built into this. So anyway, we've got the initial access, and we see this 9 times out of 10 with these attacks. So as soon as they're logged into your Office 365 account, they've got access to your mailbox. They might have access to your OneDrive or any SharePoint or any files or any other systems that are protected by that login. So first thing up, they can sell that login details. It's now validated, so it's actually worth more money. And generally these attacks, step one, they're going to send some spam, but they'll send it from your account or the person who's been hacked account. So it comes with a bit more authority because it's come from someone that somebody trusts. And they set up some rules so that you can't ever see the emails have been sent. And they've got the backdoor access so they can go back in and sell it again to get back in again. And these things are always automated. So while they're in, you can't guarantee what they've done. They might have looked through your mailbox, they might have looked through SharePoint, they might have looked through your other storage. So you don't know that they've not necessarily stolen any information that could mean that you're compromised. So any of these things means you've got to have a requirement to inform the Information Commissioner's Office. So again, there could be a financial penalty for that, but there could be a reputational penalty as well, where you've got to follow around, email all your customers and tell them that you've been hacked, and apologise and try and explain that they haven't actually lost any of your data. Big thing though, once they're in, that's them. So that information is then sold on, a second group might come along, and then that's where the real trouble starts. So they've got the validated way of getting into your system, they've got the credentials, and that's where they can start to do things like command and control and exfiltration and ransomware and all sorts of other bad things. So even from a really simple beginning of just a user getting a link, which seems to be appropriate because the information that's surrounding it from other people's LinkedIn and Facebook seems to make sense, can really cause some major damage. So that's all I've got to talk about for now. Don't want to keep all the way for the lunch. So we'll open up back to Karen.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Stuart. I know I have a couple of questions, but does anyone else have any questions they would like to ask Stuart before I ask any?
Put their hands up.
Don't see any hands up. Oh, Mark.
Yeah, so how secure do you think Google Workspace is in comparison, say, to Office 365, and how easy is it for people to compromise you through Google Workspace?
I mean, pretty much all of these things are moving targets. So the underlying technology and security around them are pretty similar. So one might move in front of the other one. I always think we generally deal more with Microsoft than Google as a company. So we know that a lot of the Microsoft technologies in place are pretty good. But I think for both systems, what we generally find is that maybe people will sign up maybe 3-4 years ago and they'll still keep the same level of security they had from back a couple of years ago. So the real trick here is to try and make sure that you keep up with all the changes and get these emails through from both companies saying, can you change this authentication or can you enable this system? And they're quite often missed. So the biggest thing for me would be make sure that you keep up with the new technologies as they come out, or the new options that are available in either system as you go through them.
Okay, no, thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem, Mark. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else have any other questions? I have one, Stuart. I suppose obviously we work with Kick and various other companies in cyber is obviously a big focus for ScotlandIS members. But for those who are not in a technical role, what are the most common ways a cyber attack begins? Is it phishing emails? Is it, is there a common way that we need to, companies need to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, generally I've got a kind of catchphrase that I use too much around the office so that people get annoyed with me. I say that most attacks start with a user doing something that we wish they hadn't done. Now, the things that we wish they hadn't done, using unsecure passwords or using the same password for everywhere. So, if you've got a password you use for a social media site or an online shop and they're hacked, but you use the same password for your corporate account, that's really dangerous. It means that when those usernames and passwords are out there, it's really easy for using these automation techniques that people just do massive attacks using the information they've got, and all they need to be is lucky once. As IT professionals, we have to be lucky every time. They have to be lucky once. So that could be, for example, even for companies who've got, access to online services, which are protected by MFA. Maybe you've got VPN and you've used the same password for that, but that isn't protected with MFA. So they just get straight in again. So common password reuse, huge problem. And making sure that you keep up to date with your MFA or second factor authentication. So if you've got an option of MFA, turn it on, make sure it's enabled and keep it up to date. I mean, a lot of the password information that's out there, used to always say, change your password every 90 days and so on, is actually old information now. So it's generally more about use strong passwords. So rather than just use a random characters, use passphrases. So 3 or 4 words that you can know, maybe with a couple of numbers and some punctuation, but it's more about the length of the password that makes it more complex and makes it more difficult to guess. And it means that you can really personalize it. With a passphrase, maybe it's a couple of words that are related to the service you're trying to log into. So again, it helps you remember without having to write them down somewhere. But again, even then, don't be scared, use password managers, but just make sure your password manager password is long and complex and protected by MFA.
Wonderful, thank you for that. And I suppose one of the things we talk about at that kind of board and managerial level, not understanding or not paying full attention to the investment that is required to ensure that your business and your systems are safe. So what are some of the proactive measures that businesses and their staff should take that doesn't cost huge amounts of money, but when we're looking at that strong passwords and things, what are other things that businesses can absolutely make sure they implement so that all of their team are as secure as they can be, at least on a first step?
Yes, I mean, from someone who deals with IT breaches, it's really frustrating that quite often these breaches could have been solved by something really simple. And from a budgetary kind of point of view, as soon as the attack happens and you realise it's happened, then the purse strings start to open. So it's really just trying to get the message across that a small amount of money spent up front will really help protect you longer term. So, I mean, you can do really expensive things. You can put in all sorts of automated systems and SOCs and so on, and they're really good and they will hold a gap. But the first point that we always see, which I tried to demonstrate today, is it's always people who make their first mistake, and it's something that people have done. So user education training, absolutely critical. MFA and making sure that passwords and login credentials are up to date and secure so that people don't reuse passwords and so on. Again, critical. And just looking at how people can get into your network and making sure that you keep up to date to close down any holes. So things like making sure that people actually patch their machines. We have an ongoing battle with people who don't want to reboot their machines because it takes too long for it to apply patches, but it really can be quite critical. When I was talking through the MITRE framework, and I said, that once they're in, they look for holes. Quite often it's because people haven't rebooted machines. That means that they then find a way that they can escalate the attack and do so much more damage. And a lot of these things are free. They don't cost any money. Takes a bit of money or maybe some time to implement, but it's, you know, really cheap and effective ways of doing things.
Yeah, no, and we've certainly seen that. One of the speakers we had at Scotsoft a couple of years ago had that very conversation. His business, he was getting ready to float his business, had a breach. He looked after domains, thought they had fixed it, couldn't find where the hacker had got in, and within 2 weeks of that breach, he had to sell the business for 5% of its value that it was 2 weeks prior. So, and one of the reasons that we had Alex speak is because nothing really has changed. And it turned out that the hacker was literally an unemployed lorry driver in the outback of Australia who was just teaching himself to hack. But because he was scared now that they could see that someone had been in the back end, he started deleting all of the databases and all of the logs, which obviously had a huge impact. So, like you say, some of it doesn't have to be monetary value. Some of it is just creating havoc in your back end, which can then put your business in the situation that obviously Alex's business was.
The really good example as well of, so we had a customer, and this again is just down to user education. So it was a kind of office worker. So they had a login to their Office 365 system in this case, and they had MFA, so they're well protected. They went to their mother's house, and their mother said, I've just had this email through, and it's asking me to log into this website, but I don't have an Office 365 login. So the person involved took their mother's laptop, logged in, used their MFA credentials, pretty much as described there, which then led to the company being hacked, information being stolen, and a report to Information Commissioner. So even just, you know, regular emails telling your customer, your users, be careful what you do and think twice before you do things can save you a lot of bother and a lot of money.
Absolutely. And I know we've got a question in there, but another one from me. How can businesses improve their instant response? So you've had the situation, it's happened, you've been hacked. How do businesses then start to come back from that? Because we've seen some big hacks happen over the last couple of years and the impact it's had on some of our kind of critical national infrastructure and businesses who are struggling. What's the first step for businesses once they realise something's gone on? How do they move that forward to try and mitigate as much as they can?
I mean, I would say the first step actually happens before the attack. So make sure that you actually think through, if we were attacked and we lost our systems, what would you do to get that back? So a bit of DR planning beforehand. But the biggest thing is to be fast. So as soon as you think that there's something suspicious going on, try and start to lock things down. So if a user's potentially been compromised, close down access to their systems, just so you can try and stop things from spreading any further. It could literally be that you just tell people to, you know, on a laptop or desktop, just actually power the machine down, pull the network cable out, just to try and stop things from spreading. Can really help, you know, help get things going through. The next thing on top of that is just have yourself with a good IT provider who you can contact, who knows what they're going to do and has a workbook that they can pass through. So they know that if you come in and say, you know, we've been hacked by, and we think we've got people on our own network or somewhere else, that they have a playbook that they can shut things down for you cleanly. Again, it's just try and stop things from spreading. Once you've done that initial stop, then it gives you a bit of time to breathe and to get things back. I mean, obviously, all the other things, you know, having a good anti-malware solution in place so that you stop any, you know, things like ransomware attacks that could cause any, you know, damage. Backups in place to make sure that you can recover from your system failures if things happen, and make sure that the backups aren't part of your network, so that if somebody hacks the credentials, they then encrypt the backup. We've had that happen as well. But I mean, speed is the first thing. Make sure you just close things down as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And I think that speed, once it's closed down, as you say, gives you that bit of breath to go, okay, what's the next step? Because I think sometimes you're in such a panic that you've been hacked that just the process doesn't, you know, you don't think the full process through. So having some of those policies and plans in place helps businesses if they're ever in that situation. We have a question, and George, I may get this wrong, so feel free to jump in, but there is a police cyber alarm offering, and I think it is free, and I'm not sure if you've heard of it yet, Stuart, or if anyone on the call's heard of it yet.
So I've
But
heard of it, but I haven't looked into it in a great deal.
so I think it's been used down south, I think with some great success, and obviously it's now arrived in Scotland. And I think in Georgia, again, correct me if I'm wrong, it sits on the outsides of servers or potentially websites and monitors the attempts to hack. So it doesn't do anything other than monitor that. And then that information, I think, is sent to Police Scotland. And I'm not sure, George, you'll be able to tell us if that's then shared with the organisation. So it's like that, I suppose it's that first defence mechanism of, right, okay, somebody somewhere knows that someone is trying to get into your systems. But if it's not something that anyone's looked into, have a wee look. It's called Police Cyber Alarm, and there's information on the website, and there's information, I think, on the Cyber Scotland Partnership website as well.
I mean, we mentioned speed, so it's anything at all that can help you catch things quicker.
Yep.
Will limit the damage and has such an impact or such an effect on the impact against your business.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you for that, Stuart. Does anyone have any questions before we let them go for lunch? Wonderful. Well, listen, thank you everyone for joining us. Stuart, thank you very much for some of your insights. There is information on cyber resilience on the ScotlandIS Cyber Cluster pages on our website and on Cyber Scotland Partnership. And for those businesses who have not yet achieved their Cyber Essentials certification, please reach out to ScotlandIS, because we have some funding that may be able to help you. Thank you again, Stuart, and thanks for Kick ICT. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.